Aeolian Sands. This week, we'll be talking about AI and if it's coming for our jobs. We'll discuss all things D33, Sheikh Mohammed's grand plans for Dubai, and slipping under the radar, we'll be discussing predictions made 100 years ago and seeing how accurate they were. My name is John, he's Mir. How are we this week?
Yeah, good. Exciting week. It's a Friday. It's the weekend. And let's get into it.
So just before we came into the show today, I met Mir. We went to Starbucks. Other coffee shops are available. And quite honestly, I'm very surprised you didn't choose another coffee shop because there were about 5 different ones in the place we were at.
I just wanted to go mainstream because I thought,
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Familiarity. Who doesn't love a watery Americano?
Trying to figure out what the sizes are called.
So one thing I realized last week, we never actually described what Aeolian Sands was and why we decided to call the podcast this name. So I thought we'd start with that this week. Aeolian is this word that I loved from when I was studying geography. I went to Exeter University. I studied geography there. And apart from colouring in, I learned a lot of different things. And one of them was about Aeolian processes. This is kind of the processes of wind and how it shapes things. And obviously, in this part of the world, Aeolian processes, they shape the dunes. So this is kind of the reason why we decided to call it Aeolian Sands. Firstly, we were like, nobody's going to know what Aeolian means. It's going to mess with people's minds. And sands, obviously, being here in the Middle East, there's a lot of it.
Yeah, representative of Arabia. And I like the idea of wind being a force of nature. And I think that's kind of what we want to uncover. What are the kind of unseen forces of nature that may, impact how we live and what the present and the future looks like. But also some things that could, shape and form the future over time.
It's the winds of change, hence Aeolian Sands. Okay, so every week we ask a big, bold question. We ask 1,000 people for their views on a range of different issues. And this week, our minions have been out and about. They've been collecting that data. They've travelled all throughout the Emirates. And this week, they've been asking people whether they are fearful of losing their jobs to AI or robots in the next decade. Here's what they said. 55% of people here in the UAE are scared that machines will take their jobs over the next 10 years. And if we extrapolate that out, that would maybe equate to nearly 5 million people. That's a lot of people who are scared, Mir.
Yeah, and I think the data also, once we kind of dive deeper into that figure, young people were most concerned, which I found quite fascinating. 66% of youth in the UAE thinking advanced technologies could make their skills and talents more redundant in the future. And another segment of that study showed that by nationality, Emiratis were the most concerned by AI and robots replacing their roles, which clocked in at 60% compared to 45% of Western expats.
Yeah, and kind of it's a bit surprising, I think, for young people with these 66% of youth in the UAE thinking that advanced technologies could make their skills redundant. Young people, perhaps they've got more knowledge of AI. Maybe they've not yet got into the groove of their careers. They're probably lower or more junior roles at this stage in their lives. These sort of 18 to 24-year-olds are Gen Zs or Gen Zs. The question I have to ask here is why as youth would you not have a little bit more exuberance for life and think, well, I've got my whole career ahead of me. I can choose and shape whichever way it goes, and I can take these punches wherever they come. If they're coming from AI, hey, look, I can handle this. Robots, you're coming to take my jobs, I'll do something else. I'm surprised that young people are the ones who are scared about it.
Yeah, I think it goes to what you mentioned about, I think it's just uncertainty. They're not sure what they want to study. They're not sure about the kind of career path. It was simpler for us in our time, as millennials and possibly even simpler decisions to make for our parents. Possibly the uncertainty or the fear comes from the anxiety of not knowing what that step is. But I'm quite interested to see why specifically AI and robots are kind of what they're most scared about.
I mean, I guess one of the questions I'd have is like, humans are adaptable creatures, right? We, in our very nature, have adapted to survive in all sorts of different things, whether it's the different climates that we live in, whether it's the tools that we've created. And AI, robots, it's a tool that humans have kind of come up with. Humans have always kind of adapted to that technology, whatever's come in. And I was kind of thinking about, when has this happened in the past? When has technology come into our lives and transformed the way that we do things? And I was thinking, well, kind of looking back at agriculture, farming. That's something where technology totally changed the way that we did things with the introduction of different tools, but specifically the tractor. When you look at the combine harvester, all these kind of things, this probably took people's jobs away. But then you also need somebody who drives the tractor, who drives the combine harvester. You still need people who do different jobs, and it just changed the way that we did them. Typically, the introduction of technology helps us perform tasks better, but it hasn't necessarily replaced our jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of geeked out on this topic because I just wanted to kind of explore how far back this actually goes. The word robot, surprisingly, was coined in 1920 by a Czech playwright. I'm going to butcher the name, Karel Čapek, in his play called Rossum's Universal Robots, R.U.R. And he imagined artificial, fully functional robotic servants that were there to do all the menial, mundane tasks that this gentleman or this family that he was writing about did not want to do.
So before he wrote this play, that word robot didn't exist.
Did not exist, according to Google. Yeah. But I guess most, and going back to your point, most of kind of our historical memory of robots, we imagine them as dumb, inelegant, machines, that are kind of sitting mostly out of sight in factories, right? And to your point, like you said, enter the Industrial Revolution, and robots really kind of served or pushed that frontier of automation, doing those most commonly things that robots are used for are, assembly, handling, picking, sorting, machining, welding, painting, those kind of things that humans necessarily did not need to do. And those are what robots do really well. So they do things.
I'm sure Picasso would have something to say when you said that painters are being replaced by robots. But I have seen it. Like, I've seen these incredible machines sort of doing amazing artwork.
But now that's where the distinction's important, and I think that's now now that's where it's gonna become a bit scarier as we progress into this conversation. So we know that robots are good at doing repetitive tasks efficiently and accurately. But the key thing about a robot is it's something that we as humans have to program to do. So ultimately, we determine what this robot or this machine is going to do and how it's going to do it. And it does it with high levels of accuracy. And then enter artificial intelligence. Again, going down the rabbit hole. As early as 1957, psychologist Frank Rosenwald started work on the idea of a perceptron, which he mimicked, or what he thought would be similar to what a neuron is within the brain. So he thought, okay, the brain is made up of neurons, and I'm going to come up with this idea of a perceptron. And he started very early rudimentary experiments where he would scan images of a male and a female, and he would continue to do that, and he would train this very simple old machine which had very limited computing power to kind of figure out the difference between a male face and a female face. Anyway, it failed, but there was a lot of hype, similar to the hype that we see today. So in 1958, the New York Times published an article that read, and this is quote, "The Navy has revealed the embryo of an electronic computer that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence." So fast forward today, that's kind of the discourse in the public mind and in the arena and on the minds of youth.
So what you're trying to say is this conversation has happened before.
It has.
Which makes me feel very deja vu. But it's interesting, like the what you were saying about how perhaps these things have been sort of mooted in the past. Just going back to what you'd said about the playwright, quite often art and science fiction particularly kind of predicts some of the things that were happening. Obviously, we're all aware of the fact that The Simpsons predicts everything that ever happens. But, you know, that kind of science fiction or art, people having a creativity to come up with these kind of ideas that people then pursue as something which becomes scientifically true. When it comes to AI and robots, when I think about this, I don't necessarily think about, oh, I've read that study. I think about the Terminator. That's what I think about when I'm thinking AI, robots, which ways it's going to go. Right, it's Skynet.
Yeah.
Right. And the funny thing is, like, I was thinking about this. Are you afraid of losing your jobs to a robot? Are you afraid of, the future, I guess, when it comes to AI and robotics versus being super excited? Like, we should all be excited, right? We should think, well, these robots, AI, it's going to help us do things better. But I reckon most people are just like, Terminator.
Yeah,
it's going to be Terminator. We're all going to go down the lines of thinking about AI robots. They're going to take our jobs. Not only are they going to take our jobs, they're also going to be wipe humans off the planet. Because that's what films have told us. Sci-fi's told us.
Yeah,
it's be afraid of technology, but actually in reality, humans are the ones who are coming up with this technology, and humans should therefore perhaps be proud of their own abilities in order to create technology which can make them do things better.
Yeah, but I mean, you can understand the fear because we've reached this tipping point now where I mentioned robots are something that we originally program and create the logic for them to perform a task. And over the past 3 decades, AI has caught up to a level where now it can think, and that's the difference. The difference between programming something to do something versus it being able to learn on its own. And I think that's where the fear of these sentient beings that participate and we have to live with. And then there come a number of issues, right? Guaranteeing of jobs, what jobs are deemed not worthy of human beings, who owns the technology, how far does it extend in terms of, is it better to have, so for example, the explosives police, they have those robots that go because obviously you don't want to endanger human lives. Like the movies that we see, should the police also have robot police officers roaming the street trained on AI? And then there are a lot of things that, again, with AI, we don't know, right? So there's one of the biggest challenges with AI is obviously bias. For any AI model to be developed, it needs to be trained on data. And the data that you provide the AI is essentially what it's using as part of its analytical model. And now what we're seeing more recently, which is I'm sure on everyone's Twitter feed, on TikTok, also in the news, is ChatGPT. So why ChatGPT is so interesting and why it's getting a lot of eyeballs. I did using our analytics tool that we use at duke+mir, I did a media volume search. And from the day that it was launched or open for public in the end of November, it's seen a 300% increase in the past 100 days in terms of mentions.
So let's just dig into this a little bit. If you haven't come across ChatGPT, firstly, get out from the rock that you're hiding under.
Yeah.
Secondly, obviously ChatGPT, fantastic for lots of different uses. It's an AI tool which you can put in all sorts of different sentences in there and ask it to do different weird and wonderful things. So, for example, write me a blog. I've written plenty of blogs myself in the past as someone who's kind of come from the journalistic field. The question there is, can this chat GPT, can it do certain tasks? Can it write something? And the thing is, it can. But right now, it perhaps lacks certain human touches. It lacks warmth. It lacks personality. And I think that's the difference between what ChatGPT writes versus a real human. A real human has a certain way of talking. ChatGPT comes up with some great sentences. It can write a blog. It can write something that's intelligent, but it just lacks that certain level of humanity, which I think is what people actually want to read. I could read something from ChatGPT, but I wouldn't be interested by it.
Yeah.
Whereas the certain nuances that humans can provide with their personality, with their knowledge, perhaps taking things which haven't been automatically programmed in and are more qualitative, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what makes, I think, something that's written by a human more valuable than something that's written by ChatGPT. But what is very interesting is how quickly ChatGPT writes. It writes far faster than I do, Mir.
Yeah, and I think for the lame person, that's when they see it, right, and they see it actually in person and they use it, their mind is blown. But it's actually a party trick, right? So when you see that thing typing or delivering that response, you think, wow, this is actually thinking like how I would think to write. So ChatGPT uses a specific, it's almost version 4.0 of this. It's called a generative transformer. So we've moved typically all the AI that we see within infrastructure, whether it's in machine learning and all the other applications that we've seen. This is a predictive tool. So it's using logic based on all the content and data that it's been trained on to predict the next word, right? So although for a lame person, when you see it, you're like, oh my God, it's actually writing me a blog. It's actually what it's doing is predicting, as we do as human beings, the next word that's going to make most logical sense in those series of words that it's written before. But again, there's certain concerns about that as well, right? So if you look at ChatGPT or OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, what they're considering now to do is to embed a digital AI watermark with all the content that ChatGPT produces.
Wow.
Because if the content that it produces is being published on a website, in a blog, in a newspaper article, on social media, and that model is using that as a data set to learn everything that it knows, it's bias reinforcement. It's basically learning off the same things that it's already said. And that's a big concern because it's going to destroy the system.
That's fascinating.
Right?
So it could actually break itself by people using this to publish
potentially
in open sources on the internet.
Potentially. And a lot of people have done studies, academic studies. Somebody gave it an SAT. It's written a term paper, university, undergrad term paper. And pretty much where it is in its intelligence, and that's the kind of X factor in terms of personality, critical thinking, analysis, or perspective, unique perspective. It would be somewhere. What they've researched is it would be somewhere between a C grade, a B- student, right? That's the level of intelligence now. But again, the amount of users using it.
Look, all those kids who are getting D's and E's and fails.
Yeah,
they're like, hey, look. This is better than me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use this. I'm going to pass.
But it's fascinating. I mean, if you look at, Facebook took 2 years to reach 1 million users, right? Pinterest took about 5 months to reach 1 million users. Angry Bird took 34 days to reach 1 million users.
Great game.
ChatGPT took 5 days to 1 million. Within the span of 6 weeks, from a company worth $0, it's now estimated to be somewhere around $29 to $30 billion. Microsoft, which was an early investor, put in $1 billion last year, is probably going to close around close to $10 billion, and where they're going to integrate this within their entire stack, everything from search, i.e. Bing, They're already implementing DALL-E, which is another platform, an AI platform that was developed by the same guys, OpenAI, the guys behind ChatGPT, which allows you to input text and it'll create any image. So now you have predictive text creating images. You've got predictive text producing text and content. It'll soon be transformed into videos as well. And that's where it gets quite scary, because China, for example, has already made it law. They've put it into law that any AI-produced content must be declared, and it's punishable by law for any content, whether it's video, text, music, anything. So yeah, there's quite a bit of uncertainty in terms of regulation, how we manage it. But then also, like, if you look at it from the positive perspective, just over the past 2 months, you have a number of new professions popping up. So you have experts who are offering courses in terms of training us human beings with the most efficient and accurate prompts to get the most out of ChatGPT. You have programmers and designers that are not actually programming the code, but teaching you how to integrate ChatGPT through automation with your entire suite and your workflow of different things. So everything from recording a meeting, transcribing the notes, putting it on an email, your entire workflow. So it's exciting, and I think it's scary as well. But kind of bringing it back, should we be scared? And should we be fearful that we're going to lose our jobs? And it goes back to your question when the tractor was invented, did people were fearful? Yes. And a lot of jobs were replaced. The manual tilling of land was replaced by a tractor that did it in half the time with one person. So yeah, what does the future look like?
I think just to kind of round this off a little, is it going to be equally used? Is AI and robotics, is it going to be equally used the world over? Because, as we've seen with certain technology, there tends to be a price that comes with it. I'm not necessarily talking about ChatGPT. I'm talking about, what's coming in the years ahead. We don't know what it's going to look like, but quite often technology comes with a price. And that price becomes more difficult for people in certain parts of the world. Western economies, rich, they tend to be able to deploy that technology relatively quickly. And it perhaps creates inequalities with the rest of the world. That's something I think is AI and robotics, is it going to be something that is affects people around the world in the same way? Here in the UAE, there's a real focus on future-facing technologies. But there's also a human touch. There's a desire to make sure that humans are looked after, they have a high quality of life, all this kind of stuff. So it was interesting to see that Emiratis, by nationality in the UAE, were the most concerned by artificial intelligence and robots replacing their roles rather than Westerners. Specifically, Emiratis are very well looked after by the United Arab Emirates. I think all people are generally, and providing them with an exciting future. And I personally, think that the Emirati passport, if you like, is probably the most valuable in the world.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fascinating to see that there is still a concern, even amongst people who are really well looked after by their government, that they might get replaced by AI or robots. So it's interesting, and I think that kind of brings us to this view that however we adopt AI and robotics, it should be complementary to human roles rather than replace them, because otherwise we could be in quite a dangerous situation where there's a lot of humans out of work, but there's a lot of robots that are making a lot of money for a few individuals. Okay, so there's been some pretty big news across the UAE and more specifically Dubai. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, he's revealed a big overarching plan to double the size of the economy in Dubai. It's called D33. Mir, tell me a little bit more about what this is.
Yeah, so D33 is an ambitious plan set out by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed. 2033 will mark 200 years since the foundation of Dubai. So again, very ambitious. And the plan is to really invigorate the economy and achieve an ambitious target of 32 trillion dirhams over the next 10 years. And essentially, it's got two main pillars or two objectives. One is to grow trade, domestic trade, and to attract FDI. And what they're hoping to do over the 10 years with a number of initiatives under this bold vision of D33 is to really create sustainable economic growth across different sectors.
So really making sure that the country itself has a bold future, lots of economic growth, drilling into a few of the different sectors. The sustainable economic growth is such a key part of it. And the plan is kind of covering a lot of different sectors.
Correct, yeah. So it covers most of the key sectors, focused on, again, going back to their original vision of moving away from dependence on renewable energy and oil. So really growing the non-oil GDP. It includes logistics, digital, legal, financial, and infrastructure across Dubai, but also supporting in the UAE and across the region itself.
I think it's fantastic to have such a big, bold plan. And I was sort of thinking about this. I was thinking, if Rishi Sunak were to go out and say, we're going to double the size of the economy of the UK in 10 years, the press would question it.
Yeah.
Here, and actually looking at the track record, when Sheikh Mohammed says it, you know, and he's got that track record. He's come up with plans in the past. What happens? Dubai becomes this incredible city.
Yeah.
It rises out of the sands. It becomes this place where the rest of the world looks to for vision. It's big, it's bold, it's beautiful, and these plans, these visions, as I said, if somebody else said it around the world, you'd be like, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But when Sheikh Mohammed says it, you know it's going to come true.
Yeah.
10 years from now, these plans will have come to fruition, and probably, you know what, it'd probably be more than he's saying now. It'd probably be even better, bigger, bolder. There's people around the world who are now looking to come to Dubai. They've been doing it for 30, 40 years. They've been coming to Dubai as expatriates and supporting the growth of this amazing city. And now, even more so, I really feel there's such a focus on Dubai as this place where people want to come to, whether it's international companies looking to set up an office, whether it's individuals looking for an exciting future-facing career. Whatever it is, technology, environment, whatever the sector that is talked about, a lot of it's covered with the D33 plan. And I know there's going to be more iterations of this plan and more things that are going to be announced in due course. But you know that all of the things that are spoken about, all of these sectors which they're trying to grow, you know they're going to grow because the vision, the power, the might of the UAE and Dubai specifically will make it come true.
And for me, and I would say rightly for us, I wrote down the same point, but just kind of taking it from a communications perspective. As communication professionals, a lot of brands can learn a lesson from this region, and specifically Dubai.
I would argue that Dubai is the biggest brand in the world,
and because this region, perhaps more so than any other region, really understands optics, both from a domestic level and international level. That excitement, that buzz, a long-term vision, a rallying cry. There's, it provides impetus. It provides energy. It attracts as much as it gives away, right? And those optics whether they come into fruition or not, that, time is the judge of that. But I think what's really interesting is that we really know how to sell the sizzle over here. And D33 is just another great initiative that is really going to get people excited. It's going to attract talent from across the world. We've seen, layoffs, news of layoffs across different tech industries. We should be attracting the best talent. Another kind of key initiative within this D33 is to grow 30 companies locally to unicorn status. Educate, provide the best levels of education, make them future ready for up to 65,000 Emiratis into the workforce. And that's why I think, going back to our big bold question where Emiratis were specifically concerned about AI and robots, there's an opportunity for brands and businesses, startups in this region to really educate, create awareness about the benefits and how it complements and can be integrated within work streams, whether they're working specifically in engineering, computing, infrastructure. From an international perspective, again, I think this is great. The way the things are certainly playing out across Europe, in the West and in Asia, shrinking economies, kind of medium outlooks, fears of recession. The UAE, not only the UAE, but also Saudi Arabia. We had Abu Dhabi Finance Week recently. Before that, we had the Future Investment Initiative, the Davos in the Desert, where you had the world's leaders, financial executives, banks, hedge funds, VCs, private equity, all swarm down. And I think that's what we do really well. It's these bold visions that, set the direction of the boat. And it's really towards an innovative regulatory framework, ease of doing business, relaxation of residency laws, tax, geography, where the meeting point between the East and the West.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're what, 4 hours from pretty much 2/3 of the world's population in Dubai. We've got access to lots of different markets. Combining this vision with, I guess, a work ethic. Everyone I've ever met in Dubai works really hard. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I've never come across a lazy person in Dubai. I've come across plenty of lazy people in the UK, but everybody in Dubai seems to really have a focus, and they want to contribute in some way to being the best version of themselves.
Yeah, I met this. Sorry to interrupt. I met this guy, and he was visiting, and it's really because of things like this, like Vision 2030 and D33. And he was visiting. He came down for a month, but now he's been here for 5 months. And I was like, he was from Barcelona, and I was like, why do you love it so much? He's like, because every conversation that I have is just about opportunity, is about collaboration. Everybody is just doing something.
It's exciting,
and
right?
It's not. No one's talking about their, about problems or anything. Everything is like can do. And I think that's kind of the theme for. I'd love that to be a theme for Dubai. That we have a can-do attitude, and we're going to make these goals happen.
I've always been somebody who really likes to look at positives. I believe in positive thinking and having that kind of energy. And, before I even moved to Dubai, I saw this city, this place as an exciting, innovative place. When I moved here, I realized it was 10 times better and more exciting than when I wasn't here. And right now, there isn't anywhere else in the world that I'd rather be than Dubai. This part of the show we call Under the Radar, and we try and find some little nuggets of information across the ether that's not perhaps been widely reported. And very interesting piece of news or piece of information came from a chap called Paul Ferry. Now, you probably don't know who Paul Ferry is. He's a researcher at the University of Calgary, and he started putting up some things on Twitter, which people started retweeting, and it was quite interesting. And what he had was he was taking some clippings. He has this hobby where he collects old newspaper clippings, and he tries and finds lots of different information from these newspapers from long ago, in archives, in all sorts of different places. I think, firstly, it's a really interesting hobby. I wish I had that hobby, or thought of that hobby. I think it's super interesting, like seeing what people have written about in the past. And as a journalist, it's something which is quite interesting, looking at media and what's been reported in the past. Now, specifically what he was putting up on Twitter recently was some predictions which were made in 1923 as to what the world would be like in 100 years. We're now here. We're in 2023. 1923 predictions, 100 years later. Let's sort of discover what people thought 100 years ago and whether any of them have kind of come true. So just looking through a few of them, the first one, we'll start off with a nice, easy one, was that men would curl their hair.
Would curl their hair? Men
would curl their hair. This was a big thing. In 1923, apparently this was such a hot topic that lots of different newspapers were writing about how years and years into the future, men would curl their hair. Now, I've got a few bits of
that was
information.
A thing in the 80s, right? When people would perm their hair.
For sure, like it's happened.
And it's making a comeback with these young kids. Have you seen them with the shaved sides and they've actually curled their hair?
These young kids, you sound like such an old fogey.
These young kids, I don't know if it's a bad term to use. It's called chamak. And you'll see them in malls and in different areas. You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Off camera there.
But surprisingly, 100 years later, I'll put some pictures up when we post it on social. Kids are curling their hair again.
So it's true. They are curling their hair.
All right.
Right. So that kind of has come true. You know, maybe they didn't predict the perming machines of the 80s, but okay, right. So men would curl their hair. This was one. Another one was eradication of diseases like cancer. Sadly, that obviously hasn't come true.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in 1923, much like in 2023, if I was predicting 100 years from now, I would say that these diseases would be eradicated. I think we're probably closer to it, and I'd really like to think that, as someone who comes from a family who's been affected by it, and I'm sure lots of people have been, we'd like to say goodbye to cancer in the future.
Yeah, that one's a bit disappointing. I would have hoped that 100 years later, we would have come up with a cure. But the good news is that, like you said, a lot of research is happening, and hopefully we'll continue to inch closer to the eradication of not only cancer but other diseases as well, such as polio, tuberculosis, that are often still found in many developing nations.
For sure, I think we can all agree with that one. And along those lines, one of the predictions was that people would live to 300 years old. Unfortunately, because of those things like the disease we've just mentioned, people aren't living until that age. But again, I remember a few months ago reading something about how the development of technology, particularly in healthcare, was inching towards this moment where we might be able to almost reverse aging.
Yeah.
And if that becomes a reality and we are able to genetically modify us as humans and reverse that aging process, because they've kind of found this little, what's the aging gene, if you like, or the bit in your bodies which causes animals to age. If we can reverse that, maybe we will live to 300 years, and possibly I'll see you in 2023, Mir. What are we on? 2123. I'll see you in 2123, and we'll see how many.
So you're just gonna like Benjamin Button.
I think in 100 years from now, hopefully I'll be wiser and more intelligent, more able to do this podcast. So 100 years ago, they also said that there would be flights to the North Pole. That's obviously not happening. We can fly. If we pay tens of thousands of dollars, we can get a flight out to the North Pole, but it's not become a regular route. People are flying into Dubai instead, which I'm sure 100 years ago they might have been like, why would you be flying into the middle of a desert?
But also, why was that aspirational for somebody in 1920 that they want to go to the coldest part of the earth and fly there? Like, it's 2023. Nobody wants to fly to the North Pole anyway, unless you're like,
maybe you like polar bears.
I don't know. Like, unless you're
Speaking of which,
unless you're a researcher.
This is going in a tangent. But did you know that there's something called a growler?
No.
This is such a random tangent, but polar bears are starting to seek to go further south, so into like northern Canada, and they started mating with grizzly bears, and the term for them is a growler bear. So it's a half grizzly, half polar bear. And let me tell you something else. It depends upon which one takes more of the which one it's more like as to what it gets called, because it can also be called a pizzly. Did you know this?
No.
So if it's more polar bear, it's a pizzly. If it's you think I'm making this up. Maybe I am. But if it's more grizzly bear, it's a growler.
What Reddit stream are you?
There's some
a part of
deep rabbit holes that I get into at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep.
So random. All right, let's do one last prediction.
All right, so there were a couple of ones. They had said that humans would develop mental telepathy. I was trying to get you to talk there, but like. That didn't work. So mental telepathy doesn't exist.
Yeah.
1,000-mile-per-hour vehicles.
But that, I mean,
yeah, kind of,
yeah.
The thing that they were talking about was 1,000-mile-per-hour freighters that would ship stuff from one side of the world to the other pretty rapidly.
Which is Hyperloop, I guess.
I think it's getting there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they thought that would easily be like a common thing 100 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what? We're still driving around with trucks. They're still going pretty much the same speeds. And you know what? There's more of them on the road, so it takes longer. There's traffic everywhere, and there's congestion. And you know, it doesn't. There's no way that a vehicle can get up to 1,000 miles per hour when it's gridlocked. So. No, 1,000-mile-per-hour vehicles. I'm saying that doesn't exist mostly because of traffic. Maybe in the future, not that far into the future, things like Hyperloop might make some of these things reality.
People were still very creative and had a lot of ideas, and you know, robots as far back as 1920. That's when the term robot was coined, and as early as 1950s, people were talking about AI and the same kind of things that we see in the news about the future of jobs and how we're going to be replaced. That was, public discourse at that time. And you have these predictions from, again, 100 years ago. And a lot of them are kind of ideas that are really being worked on and developed. So yeah, if you're looking for a lot of inspiration, there's definitely an idea out there that can be worked on.
Whatever the future holds, whether it's 100 years or 10 years from now, I would say we were going to have an exciting time of things in Dubai. And whether it's artificial intelligence or robotics, whether it's the vision of the people of this country and city, I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about what the future holds in the Middle East and here in Dubai. This has been Aeolian Sands. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. You can follow us, of course, on YouTube. We've got the podcast available on Spotify and also on iTunes as well.